Welcome to Marcos and James, the Lisbon Pirates podcast. Good morning, Tiago.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. Well,
Yeah?
except for allergies.
Yeah, and do you know I have the same
Oh,
same
they're
thing.
terrible.
And in the last week, it's been
It's been-
harder.
yeah. It's what is it? What do we say? Primavera.
É primavera. Here we say chegada da primavera when spring arrives, or the febre dos fenos. I think we can say that.
Oh, I've never heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's terrible.
Because
the
of
pollen.
Yeah.
It's I was walking through the park the other day with my dog Flicker, and it was like it was snowing.
Yeah,
Because it was-
those white things. Yeah.
Oh, it's falling from the
Yeah.
trees, and I
They
was
can kill you.
sneezing.
They
I
can
was
kill you.
dying. Yeah. So
Do you know what I do? It's a kind of it's my way of. First, I should go to the doctor because I never made
the test, the allergy test.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I should
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
But because we live near by the sea, one of the things is generally I go running and
Mhm.
making some exercise, and because the beach is near, I always dive.
Oh, it's
To the
probably
ocean.
therapeutic to
Yeah, it
jump
helps.
in the salt
Yeah,
water.
Yeah, the salt water helps
Yeah.
a lot. So
Oh, that's
I
great.
think if it was not the case of us living near the beach, probably
Yeah.
I'd be worse.
So I went to the doctor to get the allergy testing a couple years ago, and so she did the testing and all that kind of stuff. And she said after the results were in, she said, "Well, parabéns, you're allergic to every single pollen-producing tree in Portugal." So she goes, "You don't even have a chance."
And what do you do? You take the
allergy
Zyrtec or
pills,
something
yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
And for a while I was taking they even have shots now.
Really?
You can take a series of shots every year to try to stop
I
it.
didn't know.
Sometimes it works. And
You tried it?
I tried it last year, and
Didn't work.
it worked a little bit, and then I felt like it stopped working.
Yeah.
But maybe you have to build up resistance. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't. Will there be pollen producing trees in heaven?
No, I don't think so. I hope for trees.
Yeah, lots
You
of
know,
trees.
I'm very sad because in Revelation it says that there will be no sea, and for me that's a major
See, I've heard you say this,
turn down.
but I'm see. I want to offer you some hope today,
Oh, please do.
because in heaven there will be a river.
Yeah, you're
Right?
right.
There will be a river.
And
So-
I enjoy rivers, but yeah, I hope it's a really
Maybe it's a
big,
nice big river.
Yeah.
With like lots of sandy beaches.
I hope so.
So that's because I was thinking about that, because you've said that many times, and you're right. It doesn't make the mention of the sea. So, but I thought maybe it'll be a nice river,
Yeah.
and we'll be able to go down to the river and
of
enjoy
course,
the beach.
If we would be talking with a very experienced theologian, probably he would add that in scriptures, sea is generally a symbol of the occult, of the things beyond our grasp, and so in a way, probably you get that said in Revelation in terms of everything will be revealed, and also there will be nothing like a kind of sea that makes things occult or hidden.
Right. So maybe there is hope.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
hope for
We hope so.
for a nice ocean, some great waves,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
sand. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
definitely like that.
Mark, I wanted to hear from you because you were preaching, and every listener can listen to your last sermon because it's on our YouTube account. And you were preaching about salt and light.
Right.
And during that sermon, it was a great sermon, you talked again about something that you've been talking in the men's meetings,
Right.
which I find really helpful. And it has to do with the difference of trying and training.
Yeah,
So
right.
I wanted to hear from you.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and really kind of it started with the discipleship time that we've been doing every Wednesday here at the church, and talking about how do disciples grow in Christ? How do we help them grow? What do we do? What does transformation look like? And so that's one of the things, as we looked at, really Jesus's life and ministry here on earth, we talked about becoming transformed in the way that we think, in the way that we act, and in the way that we do things. And so part of that was just talking about how when we train, it's a huge difference than when we try. And so we want to train for righteousness. We want to train for these habits that then become character in us, and that then we can be the type of person or the type of disciple that Jesus wants us to be. But that being a big difference than just trying.
Yeah.
And so, Tiago, tell me, what do you see in that when we ask people to try, or when people try, what usually is the result? What happens?
Yeah. Probably you'll have a period, a time where you can acknowledge that people are doing their best, and in a way, probably you'll have a period of time where people are making some progress, but generally it will stop. So it will happen something that it puts us back in the place where we were before. And at least trying to be very honest and humble about this. For me, when I first heard the difference, it was really helpful, because every time you're trying, you're in a way you're really on your own.
Right.
You're on your own. Right. You're not depending. You're depending on yourself, and it's completely different of what even talking about the Beatitudes we've been preaching on the Sermon of the Mount. Yeah, and I can even apply the training distinction there. Jesus doesn't call his disciples to try.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
He called his disciples to be. So it's not dependent on their own ability, but it's dependent on the ability of the king of the kingdom. And for me, it's been really mind-changing. And it's really helpful.
Yeah. So I would say, like, one of the most helpful things when I started thinking about all this and reading these discipleship books and stuff is that when they talk about trying is expecting a different result, but without the right tools.
Yeah.
So when we talk about, let's even just say the Beatitudes, what does that mean to have the right tools in order to grow or to change or to expect something different, to train, in other words? What does that mean? Like, for you, when you think about what are the tools that you would need to do when you're thinking even about the Beatitudes?
I would say that, and I will try to be simple answering this, because in a way it's very easy for me to make it complicated.
That's what I like about you, though. You make it complicated. I'll try to make it simple.
In my very complicated way, I will try to be simple too now. At least for me, the first thing when I hear Jesus making compliments to people, to humble people, to meek people, to all the other characteristics that you find in Beatitudes, the first thing that generally I will think is, I wasn't born that way, so I'm not going to get there. Of course, I will not even pronounce this that I'm thinking, but in a way, it's the first reaction. I was not born that way, and in a society that tends to bring or take great value of the way you were born and being faithful to yourself, hearing the Beatitudes can sound crushing, because you feel, I don't have the original material to accomplish this.
Exactly.
So, and that's when you go and try, and generally, okay, you can have a small period of time where things get a little bit better, but you get stuck on yourself. It's completely different if you think about Jesus is asking that because he's the king. The what's at stake, it's not your personality, your natural personality as a disciple of Christ, but it's the personality of the king, of the teacher, of the rabbi, of Jesus. So focus on Jesus and not on yourself. And this is not a way of cheating your own personality, but on focus where your muscles should be. Should be on getting Jesus, not necessarily getting yourself. And that's where I think it becomes more easier to understand the training and not the trying.
Yeah. And so what you're saying is that, one of the things I think that's interesting when we're studying the Sermon on the Mount, and especially the Beatitudes, is to think through this, to think that Jesus is intentionally leading us through these series of Beatitudes to help to strengthen us, to help to change us, to help to transform us. And so you see these as building blocks, don't you? And I think you even talked about that in the Sermon on the Mount, how it kind of takes us somewhere. It's not something that all of a sudden you go, okay, I'm going to try to embody this, or I'm going to try to do my best at these things, and then we fail over and over and over. But it's really, isn't it submitting ourselves to what Jesus is trying to do here?
Yeah, even because right now I'm preparing the last Beatitude for next sermon. And in a way there's a very logical cycle happening, because the first compliment that Jesus was making about being humble in spirit is the kingdom of heaven will belong to them, and then you'll get that same compliment when he talks about being persecuted.
That's right.
So in a way there's a cycle which is being closed, but the award, and there's a lot of award speaking during the Sermon of the Mount, which I find in a way it's puzzling. But the award of being all that characteristics being complemented by Jesus, meek, hungering for justice, merciful. The award is, okay, now that you are that kind of person, congratulations, you are going to be persecuted.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Which is very anticlimactic. And for me, how would I say? If Jesus is someone that you are going to follow because what he assures you it's very attractive, and you read what he's saying, you are not going to follow him.
Right.
So it's not really about trying, because you're not even going to try, because it will not be something that you will desire for yourself.
Exactly.
So it's a completely it's a new life. It's really a new life. Jesus, that's why it's so stupid when some people try to disconnect the Jesus of the Sermon of the Mount of the Jesus of the cross.
Right.
Because you really need a new life to be desiring what Jesus is complimenting in the Sermon of the Mount. And you only get a new life thanks to the death of Jesus.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So for me it's been great.
Oh, I think it's foundational, because I think even before we started the sermon series, in my mind I had thought through this and maybe processed it, but this is coming out in such a real way, because what we do to obey Jesus after his death and resurrection can't be done unless we spend time thinking about what Jesus is asking us to be. Right here in the Sermon on the Mount. And I've said this many times. I said this in a sermon last month, I believe, as well. Just to say that, when we jump ahead and we want to make disciples and we get super excited about that, but we don't spend time thinking about who Jesus wants us to be, we kind of, in a sense, put the cart before the horse, or we try to do something without what Jesus has done to transform us, to change us, before he asks us to ever even go and make disciples. So it's been fascinating. It's been fascinating to think about this.
And we tend, at least I do, we tend to separate things, and we tend to compartmentalize.
Compartmentalize,
it's difficult to say in English. But we tend to put everything in different boxes. And one of the fascinating things about reading the Bible is that when you read the Bible, of course, there are different things. There's a rich multitude of stuff that you are going to, and it will take a lot for you to understand that, even intellectually speaking. We believe that the Spirit is leading the process, but at the same time you get the harmony.
Exactly.
You get the harmony of and even when you were preaching last sermon, you said a very simple and powerful thing. Is you were saying that we can all benefit from discipleship books and techniques and new analysis about the subject, but really the core, being salt and light, is what you need. Is the discipleship course that you really need.
Right.
It's that simple.
Oh, I'm so convinced about that. Yeah, and I'm convinced that's like you said, books are great, techniques are good, methods are good, but I think probably our tendency is to seek after the newest method or the newest book, or spend so much time thinking about practically what does this look like, instead of just going back to what Jesus has taught us to be, and that being the primary really text that we use to say this is what we should be. And then I think I made that link to evangelism, to say if evangelism is really good and it's important, but if we're going to really understand what Jesus meant by being salt and light, then we need to go back to that and say this is the kind of people that we need to be, so that we can do what Jesus is asking us to do. And I think, our human tendency is just to seek after every new thing that comes down. And I don't know, it's a hard thing, because people are so interested in something new, or a new technique, or a new method. And how do we do this, Tiago? Because how do we continue to bring people back to what Jesus teaches and let that be enough?
I don't know. I don't want to sound oversimplistic, but it's the power of the word. Remember, all that is because the word spoke life, and Jesus is the word made flesh. So when you gather in a community of people that believes all of this and really cherishes this, going to the word, you are opening the fountain of every God's action.
Right.
So that's why we don't tire. We don't feel tired about reading the word and getting, because that's where life is.
Right.
That's where life is. I can admit that sometimes I'm talking about myself here. Yes, we can. Unfortunately, we can separate a lot of what we say from what we live. Sure. And that was never the plan of the word. So, because even biblically speaking, the word is not something that's statically away from action. You only get action because the word is. Yeah. So, but I don't want to sound too much philosophical saying this, but even right now, when you were preaching last sermon, and now and I'm preparing the next, one of the link there, and I would never, and I know the Sermon on the Mount by heart, but I never linked the two things, because one of the commentators, I don't remember now who was the guy, he was saying, being salt and light, it comes from being persecuted.
That's right.
Comes from contrast.
Yes. Yeah.
It's about contrast. That's why you were preaching about that. That's why the salt preserves the flavor of things, because it's different from, because the other things will not preserve, and that's why light illuminates the darkness.
Right, exactly.
So he was linking something that I never thought about, that this commentator I was reading right now. He was saying, because you're persecuted, you are salt and you're light. Right. And generally, we want to be salt and light, not coming from persecution, but coming from acclamation.
Exactly.
You think that you are salt and light because everyone is enjoying what you're doing. And Jesus is saying the opposite.
Right.
You will not be loved.
That's right.
In John, he will say that. You'll not be loved because I'm not loved. You will be hated because I'm hated. Exactly. And that's when you can be salt and light. And man, of course, Martin Lloyd-Jones, and he was funny saying that, and he was right. Of course, Christians don't go looking for trouble or looking for persecution. That's right. We don't go to the streets trying to get ourselves killed. But you cannot skip the link between being persecuted and being salt and light.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so important, because like I said in the sermon, we don't tear that out from the context of where Jesus is trying to take us. And so, that's the one thing that I mean, we don't probably have time this podcast to talk about that, but we should talk about persecution.
Yeah.
And persecution, that's one thing that really, I really was working hard to understand when I was preparing that sermon about salt and light, but then also something I really want to explore as well is to think, okay, so if we are salt and light, what does that look like for us here? Because typically we think of persecution as always out there, in a different country, way away from us, and so we're in a sense we make this safe zone for us because we live in a country with relative freedom, and even though religious freedom doesn't mean equality, but there is religious freedom to practice our faith, and so I think there's that problem that we create when we go, well, it's never here. And then we insulate ourselves or we isolate ourselves from persecution ever even happening because we are different. So anyway, thanks.
But I would like to ask you. Even thinking about the trying distinction. How's it for you? How do you train? How do you train? Being humble. For instance, because it will get you. It will not make people love you more.
Right. Absolutely.
How does it happen in your own life?
Well, the first one I'll say is a joke, and then the second I'll be serious on the second one. The first one is anytime I'm in Portuguese traffic, I have to train in being humble.
You and every
I'm not joking.
Portuguese citizen.
It's crazy. Like I literally have to think. Like as I'm going, because people are, how it goes. You get in traffic, people are honking, they're throwing up horrible signs, they're communicating, but not in a good way. So I mean, that every day I have a chance to either be humble or to be horribly rude and terrible, just like everybody else. But that's the joke. The second part, I think honestly, as I think about like what Jesus asked us to do, especially in the Beatitudes, is to embrace that type of lifestyle, to know that that's just who Jesus wants us to be, that every disciple in the kingdom is humble, is a peacemaker, is meek, is pure in heart. And to really to ask Jesus, to say to Jesus, listen, like the first one says, blessed are the poor in spirit. We don't have in and of ourselves the ability or the capacity to do this. And so we need to be radically changed. And then to really give that over to Jesus. But then to see some very, very positive and good steps that Jesus gives us to accomplish those things. And I think you mentioned even some of them. But to really embrace this idea that the spiritual disciplines are those tools that we can use to help us to be more meek, or help us to be somebody that hungers and thirsts for righteousness, or somebody that embraces peacemaking, or all the kind of things that we want to do. And so, I mean, you kind of mentioned it. One of the spiritual disciplines that you could start with is just the Word. Being people that read the Word,
you need that.
embrace the Word,
really
put the Word in their mind and in their heart, to memorize the Word, to go back to the Word when we're confronted with a problem or a difficulty, instead of going and looking for all the solutions that the world has to offer or whatever, is to go back to the Word. What does the Word say? What does the Word challenge me to think through here? But just to use those tools to help us train, and then as we train, I really believe that God will do that work through the Holy Spirit to change our character, to make us more and more like Christ. And that's hard because what it requires, and we've talked about this. It requires submission. It requires humility. It requires giving up on our thoughts or the way that we think we should do our life. So I don't know. That's kind of the way that I approach it or think about it.
And for me it helps a lot because I've been spending too much time in my Christian life, and I've been a Christian since I was 6 years old, but trying harder.
Right.
And it's really liberating when you know that it's not about trying. Of course, when we say this, we are not saying that it will not take everything from you.
Right,
of course,
right.
And I think that we forget nowadays a lot of the value of the will. During medieval times, I think they had a more mature perspective on what the will is.
Right.
Right now, for us, will is what we feel up to.
Exactly.
Only.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's much more in our will. And we, as Reformed Christians, as evangelicals, we don't deny the place of our will in God's grace.
Right. Exactly.
Of course, God's grace will use and reform and make new our will.
Right.
So we are not just waking up and waiting for a miracle to happen. That's why what you were saying is very helpful, because you have to go and you have to eat the word.
Right. Right.
You have to pray. You have to use the word as a mirror, not only as a screen where you get information out, but really as a mirror.
Yeah.
And for me, even I've been reading devotional from Tim and Kathy Keller from Proverbs, and it's really helpful beginning the morning, and because it's really a mirror that I have. And you know, you as American, the American culture, as one of the great things about American culture, I think, you are very quick to ask people questions, and that's very important. Sometimes we are too afraid in Portugal to go to someone and ask a question, and a personal question. We tend to be afraid. That's a thing, and I would just like to add this, that for me it's been very encouraging as one of the pastors here, having another pastor like you, and you go, and I know how you work. We've been working together for some time now, and you that's one of the things that it's the training thing. You go and you ask someone something, and you go and you're not how do you say, you're not, tu não pedes desculpas, you're not
make excuses or
making excuses.
Yeah.
And one part of the training is for you to be in a community of people where you say, okay, guys, you can come to me and make me some questions, ask me some questions. It's part of training. It's a very simple example, but I believe it's a very powerful one.
And being okay with the awkwardness.
Yeah, of course.
Like, sometimes it's awkward to go ask somebody a question, or to ask them a deep spiritual question, or ask them how they're doing, or what they're doing, or how are they training, how are they working this out, how are they figuring this out.
But aiming God's at grace. The heart. I've been learning that a lot from you. Aiming at the heart. What's on your heart? Even what's in your heart.
Sure.
Even when we don't know. But that kind of positive pressure. It's a part of the training.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and just so you know, this didn't come from me. So wiser, older people in my life helped me to understand the power of a well-placed question, especially when it's done with spiritual intent, with the desire to see it to the heart of somebody, or to what's going on, and what's behind that is spiritual care, and spiritual desire to see people grow in Christ. And so the question, it's not just to throw a question out there, or to get into people's business, but it really is to say, I love you so much that I want to see you grow in Christ. And so I'm going to ask you a hard question that's going to penetrate into your heart. And the great thing about those questions is that even if the person can't respond at that moment, they walk away thinking about it and internalizing it, and then that's when God just can work with His Word and the Spirit, to be able to kind of have those things kind of just continue to do the work internally. And I think that's when true change really does happen.
Let me just add one last thing, because right now I'm thinking about the Gospel of Mark, for example, as an example.
And everybody needs to go out and buy your new book.
Even if they don't understand Portuguese.
That's okay. They can learn Portuguese by reading your book.
Ooh, that would be great. I would like to see that happen. But one of the things that it's, for me, it's encouraging, it's knowing that the way that Jesus had to deal with His disciples It was a lot. He made a lot of hard questions.
Yeah,
They were all over the place trying to answer. And even when you read the Gospel of Mark, you feel sorry for the disciples. I will take the disciples' side, because Jesus is really hard sometimes. Sometimes you just don't even get where he's getting. What's the point of the question?
Right.
But there's such a spiritual power, like you were saying, when you go directly to the heart, even when it seems like your mind is not even processing, but you're going to the heart. And we are, I generally love to say that we are Augustinian people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Augustine understood that in scriptures. He was all about that. Calvin was all about that. Luther was all about that. Jonathan Edwards was all about that. That's why we are so, could we say, cardiacal about that? How would you say when you have a heart surgery, you don't use the word cardiac?
No.
You don't have cardiology?
Cardiology, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because it's
but how is that? Wait, and so how do you
because
say
in Portuguese you say cardíaco. You have tens problema cardíaco. You have a cardiacal problem.
Man, my English is not so great to be answering these questions.
It's all about the heart.
Well, we would just say you'd have a heart issue.
Yeah, heart issue. Yeah.
We need somebody that has a background in science. That can tell us what the actual question is.
Yeah.
It is a heart issue, though, isn't it?
Yes, it's always a heart issue.
Yeah.
It's always. And the Bible is so complete. It's the Word of God. I was reading Jeremiah this morning, and you have a chapter there, 16, 17, I don't remember, I'm saying from memory. But because the Bible is very sincere, and it will say sometimes the Bible is all about getting into people's heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it will say also that the heart can be deceitful.
Exactly.
So don't trust on your own heart.
Right.
The heart is the theater where everything will happen, the good and the bad, and that's why Jesus said in Mark 7, the bad things they come from.
They come from the heart, the inside.
But that's why we have to. It's the field where we should be playing our game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every time.
Well, good. Well, we're going to close out this podcast just to remind you that every Sunday we're here at Igreja da Lapa at 11:30 for our normal Portuguese service. And then once a month, we do our English service at 5 p.m. And the month of May, it's going to be on May 27th at 5 p.m. And so we'd love to see you at Lapa.
Yeah. See you guys.